Me off. What's up, you beauties? Welcome to HW 3.33. I'm Jim, and I'm joined by the host of HW Full Circle, my esteemed co-host, Jack Smith. If you're not listening live, please make sure to subscribe, follow, and listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Spreaker. Before we get into our show, let me give a quick shout out to our affiliate sites, fullpresscoverage.com and bellyupsports.com. Belly Up Sports recently updated their site. Go check it out during our episode. They have everything you need when it comes to sports. They do what the others don't. And while you're listening to our episode, check out our site, which I have to update as soon as we're done tonight, hwhockey.net. All of our episodes can be found there. All the episodes all show up on YouTube. They're on Twitter right now, Facebook, wherever you're watching. Thank you. We have a guest for the episode. Will be joining us in just a few minutes. The man, the myth, the legend, Anthony San Filippo of Snow the Goalie podcast. We're excited to have Anthony on. But Jack, it's been 4 hours since the trade deadline. What are you thinking, dude? How did Chuck Fletcher do in your eyes? Let's hear it. It seems like right as soon as we got off, moves started to happen.
Yeah, he really waited to the deadline, to the wire there, and that surprised me. I didn't think he was going to have to. Either way, he redeemed himself a little bit in my eyes. I don't necessarily know why the Lawton contract had to be done now, unless I'm missing something. I just felt like he should have been working the phones a little bit more. That being said, he did trade a lot of nothing for something. Gustafsson was definitely a nothing. It's a seventh. It's something. He's off the team. He got something. Raffle, who we all said he was a good guy to get moved, if not Lawton, I had heard nothing up until it happened. So the fact that he got a fifth for him, I'll take it. So it shows me that he does understand that trading guys there's not going to be with the future of your team just for any assets is a good thing. On top of that, Lawton did sign a 5-year deal with an AAV of $3 million a year. A lot of other things need to change with this team, but that contract on its own, I don't mind it. I like Scott Lawton, and that's a cheap price if you ask me.
Yeah, I feel that was fair value for Scott Lawton.
Well, flat cap kind of ruins that a little bit, but in a normal cap error, I think $3 million for what Scott Lawton does, and I think you're getting a discount on the price because it's 5 years. I think he wanted to stay a Flyer. And I think if he went to the open market, say this offseason, I think he would have gotten definitely more money, probably less term. But, I mean, he's a valuable player, especially in this lineup. When you look at what went wrong this season, Lawton's not in that top list. There's a big list, and Lawton's not one of them.
No, he's played very well. Played very well last year. I think it's deserving. Sorry, that's my phone. My echo tonight. Lawton deserves that contract. So I can't say that I was disappointed. He is my favorite player on the team currently. So I was happy about it. I think he's the kind of guy that this team could use right now, and happy he's going to be around for 5 years. It kind of reminded me of the contract that Tanev signed with Pittsburgh. That they kind of went out and got their guy. It was similar.
Or 6 years, $5 million, something like that.
I think they may have paid a little bit more for Tanev. But yeah, I'm okay with that deal. The Raffle deal, I think both moves came right up at the deadline or just after. The Raffle deal surprised me a little bit. Surprised me in a good way. I wouldn't say that I was a huge Raffle fan. I don't think there really are too many huge Raffle fans, but I liked him. I liked his game. I liked what he brought to this team, on the ice, off the ice. So yeah, you had to move him. He was a UFA. They got a 5th round pick. Whoop-de-doo. Eric Gustafsson, that was Fletcher admitting a mistake, and he did the right thing. Got him off the team. They retained 50% salary. Got a 2020-22 7th round pick for him. So that's whatever. That's fine. Yeah. Just happy he's gone. And, I guess now it's kind of like, let's pump some of these younger guys into the lineup and see what they got heading into next year. We've heard a lot of things of Lazinski and Wade Allison playing very well with the Phantoms. Wade Allison, of course, is on the taxi squad currently. Lazinski played, I believe it was yesterday, against the Sabres, so you would assume that he'll be in the lineup going forward. I don't want to say that I'm excited. I'm glad Chuck made moves. What I'm looking forward to getting to is Chuck's press conference. There was a couple things there that I enjoyed. I believe it was Mike Sealski asked a question to Chuck. Do you foresee changing any of the coaches during the offseason? Because there was a lot of talk about players, and rightfully so. It's the trade deadline. And Chuck Fletcher simply said no, not changing. All he said was no. And to me, that kind of meant the issue with the team is the players, right? He picked the coach for a reason. The coach picked his coaches, and they're not changing that after 2 seasons. So, at least for me, I liked that answer because it kind of tipped his hat a little bit. It tipped his hand. It told me that he's going to be making changes in the offseason. And there were more questions. I don't know if you got to see that, Jack, but you could really see, there's intent to make some moves once this season is over.
So I certainly hope so. And I wanted to say on the Brandon Tanev contract, I don't know why I thought he was making $5 or $6 million, but I see what you're saying. It's only 3.5 for 6 years. So it is similar. The only thing I like about what Lawton is what, 26, 27 years old. So that's going to take him up to age 31, 32. That's like the prime of his career. And he has a lot of the intangibles that this team, we always complain that they don't have. And he's like one of the few guys that has it. He can essentially play on any line when needed. I'm not putting him on my first line going forward, but I think $3 million you will see over time is going to be a bargain, somewhat of a bargain, not like it's a great bargain, but a bargain. And he's a flyer through and through. On the Chuck Fletcher comments, yeah, there better be a lot of movement with the players because we've heard some things about the coaching staff and maybe some locker room issues. And I don't think very few fans, I think, are going to defend these players because they've been here through a plethora of coaches. And ultimately, they can't get it done. So we know it's not the coaching. We know it's them, and they need to change. So I'm hoping this is a precursor to I'm going to do what I got to do because it gave me a little confidence that, one, he said that. And you're right. If he's not the coaches, then it's the players. And because you can't run this back, that would make the Lawton contract look really stupid then. You move on from Raffle. You knew you had to anyway. He's getting older. You got all these young guys. It just makes sense. And Gustafson was a mistake. You're going to bring back Lawton because Lawton was not an issue. We are going to deal. Hopefully he will deal with what the issues are. And that's not just adding. We're not just going to go find a defenseman and then run this back. Like people need to be shipped out of here. We'll see if the coaching staff, the general manager agrees with who we think that is. Either way, Fletcher has a lot of work to do in the off season. And he's got a lot of opportunities with the draft and the expansion draft and free agency.
Absolutely. And having said that, let's bring in our guest for the episode, the man, the myth, and the legend, Mr. Anthony San Filippo. And thanks for hanging out with us. How are you?
I'm doing great, guys. How are you doing?
Awesome.
Okay.
Great to have you.
It ended up being a couple moves. I think moves, maybe some we expected, maybe some we didn't expect. How are you feeling after today?
Well, I think this was about as well as Chuck could do on the deadline. I think that there are things that he may have laid the groundwork for the offseason in the process of leading up to the deadline, really kind of talking hockey trades that weren't made. Here, mostly everybody that was traded is a pending UFA. So I think that as far as that is concerned, that's about as well as he could have done. But it was interesting. Like the one thing that I thought was the most interesting thing today was the Lawton contract, in the sense that if Lawton really wanted to be here, he could have just signed here as a free agent in the offseason. And the Flyers could have traded Lawton and gotten an asset of some kind, and probably a decent draft pick because there was a lot of teams that were interested in acquiring him. And the fact that Chuck chose not to make that trade and to sign him now and not get into a potential bidding war with other teams, at the start of free agency, tells you how much they value him. which I didn't think they valued him that much, because if they did, I would have thought they would have signed him prior to today, right? So it was really kind of an interesting to me how that all came together. The Raffle trade, I mean, we kind of knew that was coming. Gustafson, the fact you got anything for him is a win, because it was such a bad signing. And I know that there were a couple other things that were discussed that just didn't come to fruition. But all told, I think that this is a good start for the refurbishing of this team, because in the summer there's going to be a lot more changes. I think you're going to see as many as 8 or 9 names that are on your current roster that won't be here next season. So I think that's kind of where we're at right now. And for Chuck, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, A+, give him a big round of applause. But at the same time, I think that he did as well as he could with what he had.
Jack, you had touched on one of the points that Ant made there. I don't know why it's escaping my mind, but
with the offseason or the deadline?
Yeah, with the deadline there, I'm completely drawing a blank. Maybe it's the fact that we have Anthony on. But
maybe it's because I talk too much. That's probably the problem.
It's not.
Yeah, no,
I was reading the comment and lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
Now, I certainly agree with trading Lawton and getting an asset and then just re-signing him.
That was it.
All we had heard up until today was how much he wanted to be a Flyer and whatnot. And I was like, well, if that's the case, that's what they should do. And there's definitely going to be interest in Lawton. So hearing that now was like, all right, if they truly believe that and I like the contract, but if they truly believe that he's important to the success of the team moving forward, and as I said to you, Jim, when you look at everything that went wrong with the Flyers this year, and that's a long list, Lawton's not really on that list for me at all. I liked Lawton's overall play this year. You said 8 or 9 names. Do you see any of those names being like a Jake Voracek or somebody of that nature?
Well, I think that they'll try and move one of either JVR or Voracek's contract this summer, whether they try and convince Seattle to take it by working another deal and giving up a prospect to Seattle, because you're trading for cap space, right? So maybe you do that, or maybe there is somebody out there who would who's got some cap room who would take on one of those contracts. I don't think you're going to look to move both, but I think one of the two they'll try and move on from. But I'll tell you what, I think that there's a real possibility of players that you wouldn't think being part of trade conversations, suddenly being part of trade conversations, come right at the right before the draft or draft day. And those guys, you're talking about guys like Phil Myers, who they signed right before the season to a nice contract. I think he's a guy that could well end up being moved on from. If the right offer came along, I could see them moving Konechny. I could see them moving Sanheim. I think those guys are a little bit more protected. I think you need to really kind of have a little bit more coming back in return for those guys. But players along the lines of Myers or Nolan Patrick even, I think the Flyers would be willing to move them for a little bit less than you think, considering where Patrick was drafted and how much money they gave Myers prior to this season.
Myers almost seems like house money, since you didn't spend a draft pick on him or anything. You kind of just picked him up, and if you can include him in a trade, I mean, from my perspective, if you can include Phil Myers in a trade to acquire a better defenseman, and I would assume in a package type deal, that would be the ideal move for me. If you need to replace, and just for an example, because I've been stuck on Ryan Ellis. If you're going after a Ryan Ellis and you need to entice a team like Nashville, put a little package together, we'll send you Phil Myers. There's your defensive replacement, and we land our top 4 defensemen while we do it.
Yeah, I think that, and it was one of the interesting things, from Chuck's presser today, and that's why I asked this question at the very end. I asked him, I said, hey, Chuck, I said, I know that there weren't, any hockey trades that really went down here at the deadline, but do you feel like, a lot of good groundwork was laid leading into the summer? And he said, yeah, he hopes so. And, he knows where teams are. And I can tell you with 100% certainty that I know that they had discussions with Nashville about trades over the course of the past month. Nashville was scouting the Flyers heavily at Lehigh Valley. And I think that the fact that Nashville kind of got back into the race in their own division is what kind of thwarted any possibility of Ekholm being traded or Ellis being traded. But that doesn't preclude that from happening this summer. Like, I think Nashville probably looks at it and says, we're a team that needs to kind of rebuild a little bit, right? And they've gotten a little bit fortunate to be in the position that they're in right now. So it's like, well, let's make one more run at it, and then we'll readjust in the offseason. So I certainly can see, I know that you're big on Ellis. I certainly can see that happening. Now, Nashville's going to probably want a decent prospect as well. You could say Phil Myers and be part of that, and that's all well and good. But they're going to probably want something more than that. They're going to probably want a draft pick, a prospect, and an NHL type player like a Myers for Ryan Ellis. If you're willing to do that, if you're willing to move, that kind of package together for Ryan Ellis, I think it could be had. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I don't just think it's that. I mean, I think that I think that they're going to add 2 forwards that have a little bit of animosity to them, a little bit of grit to them, a little bit of who would have been a really nice addition for this team, and he got traded, and not to the Flyers, but and I don't know if the Rangers ever would have traded with Philadelphia anyway, but Brendan Lemieux. That's the kind of player that the Flyers need that they don't have. They need at least 1 or 2 of those types. They need 2, I think. Well, definitely 1 defenseman, and we'll see. I think Cam York's going to get an opportunity to show what he can do here at the end of the season, so we'll take a look at that and see if he's NHL ready. If he is, then they may only need 1 defenseman. If he's not, then they may need 2. And they're going to need a backup goalie, and that's kind of what you're looking at. So you definitely need those 5 players, and I think you're going to probably have a couple of guys come up from the minors, and that's why I say you're going to turn over about 8 spots on this roster from what you have right now or had going into today by the time they come back and play in October.
That's a huge turnover, man.
It is. For hockey, it's very big.
Go ahead, Jack. Were you going to say something?
There's a couple of names that we were discussing, and for more than just a salary cap purposes, do you think a big name gets moved for maybe some kind of locker room culture? I don't know if this is even a real thing, but just we speculate until there's no tomorrow with how this team is incapable of just starting games off the right way, or once they get down into such a bad hole they can't get out, or they're getting blown out against the same team over and over again. Is it like and then we hear constantly that there's might be issues with the locker room and the coaches again, and it's like, it's Fletcher, because he seemed like he's standing by his coaches after today, that they move somebody like Voracek's the only one that comes to mind because it makes most sense contractually, that he's moved or they pushed to move him instead of JVR simply because of the term on the deal and what culture and how long he's been with the team.
Well, I mean, again, I think that that's a real possibility. I mean, it's going to depend on who they're moving, one of those contracts to, like what they want. I mean, does Seattle want Voracek? Is Seattle going to try and be what Vegas was in year 1? Are they going to go out and get teams to give them 2 really good players in place of not taking 1 player who's probably not as good as the 2 of them combined? Which is, if you remember, that's kind of what they did with Alex Took. That's how they got him, what's his name? Jonathan Marchessault. I mean, they were able to get those players because they were shrewd in saying, well, okay, we'll take these 2 prospects, quote unquote, and turn them into NHL players right away. So, I mean, if you're Seattle and you say, we're close, and they're doing that with other teams, and we can use a player like Jake Voracek, maybe they will do it. I don't know if either one of those guys is going to get you a different locker room presence. It might give you an opportunity to sign a different locker room presence. I don't think you're going to trade for one straight up there. I don't see how that would work. But I think I do. I think that you need some guys who are going to go out there and they're not going to care what the other team says. They're going to get in your face. They're going to be agitators. You need those personalities on this team that are definitely lacking. As far as what's going on in the locker room, I've heard a couple of different things. So on Wednesday's episode of this coming Wednesday's episode of Snow the Goalie, I'm recording an interview with Nick Kiprios, and Kipper has had some insight into what's been going on in the locker room. I do know from a player, I wrote a story on Crossing Broad earlier in the week that they're not happy with the way Vino treats Carter Hart. It's funny, Brian Elliott has a good game, and there's effusive praise from the coach, and Carter Hart has a good game, and it's like, oh, he wasn't really tested. Well, okay, thanks, coach, appreciate it, right? So there are some issues. Those issues, though, I'll tell you, are not new in any locker room. Every locker room's kind of has these things. Every locker room has players who don't like the coach or players who don't see eye to eye. The important thing is kind of keeping that stuff in-house and not letting it get out. So, as a reporter, I love it getting out, right? I love you guys. I love these guys telling me what's going on so I can report it. That's great for me. But I would say that probably it's better for the team if they can kind of settle their issues in-house and not let any of that stuff out. So,
I got a question for you about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Could this be an old school coaching tactic? Because if you look at the numbers, and I'm not saying that they go out and play harder for Brian Elliott, but Brian Elliott's numbers are a lot better than Carter Hart's this year. Not saying the team's playing any worse in front of Carter Hart, but do you think it could be a sort of a tactic by Alain Vigneault to kind of get the players to rally around Carter Hart and be angry at Alain Vigneault? And you know what? Get them all kind of pumped up and say, you know what? He's picking on our goalie. We got to play better for him when we get out there. Do you know what I mean?
It's the ultimate Philadelphia story, right?
Yes.
It's like we hated Gritty the first hour and a half he was around, and everybody started picking on him from around the country. And we're like, wait a minute, you can't pick on him. He's ours. And now he's beloved, right? It's the same kind of thing, right? No, I think so. I think it can absolutely, Vigneault is an old school kind of coach. And, he doesn't mind calling out his players publicly. We saw it last year when he called out the vets, the whole big boy pants thing and everything else. He doesn't mind calling out players. And if he feels like a player needs to be better, he will say it publicly. And, today's player, the 2021 athlete, I'm not going to say in hockey, I think you see it in other sports as well. Yeah. But I think the 2021 athlete is a little bit more grew up in that participation trophy generation. So they're never sensitive. Really – right, they're a little bit more sensitive about these things, right? For sure, and they need to grow a set in my mind. But at the same time, one of the things that was interesting, we had Scott Gordon on the podcast last year when he took over, or a year and a half ago now when he took over as interim coach, and he said the most interesting thing for him was learning how to communicate with today's player. You might not be happy with the player, but you need to explain to them why you're not happy or why they're have to do something different. That's what the modern athlete wants. You can't just yell at them and get them fired up and then they'll listen to you, right? So I think that's kind of what it, in that regard, AV maybe misses it a little bit. Maybe he needs to kind of figure out how to talk to the modern player a little bit differently. So I think there needs to be a little bit of give and take both ways. The players need to accept that the coach is going to be a little bit of a hard ass, and the coach needs to accept the fact that maybe he needs to be a little bit more. He needs to hug these guys a little bit more when they're not playing well.
So Mike Keenan's not lasting in today's game as a head coach, then? Huh?
No, I can't even get Mike Keenan to come on my show because he doesn't know how to use Zoom. Okay, all right. I've literally 3 times I've tried to have Mike Keenan on, and he can't figure out Zoom. So we're done with Mike Keenan.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. I mean, that does make some sense. I worry about a goalie's confidence with goalies being such voodoo with how they are.
Yeah.
And it's to see how poorly he's played and how it's dropped off. And with it not being all his fault by any stretch of the imagination, Elliott has definitely played better. But we've said Elliott's like he's a creature of habit at this point in his career. He just goes out and does what he always does. Hart is questioning himself. That training regimen he did in the offseason, that could have been a massive swing and miss. I just hope that the season ends and they make – obviously this roster structure has to be fixed. But the guys that we know are going to hopefully take us in the future, like Carter Hart, I hope this doesn't have any lasting, lingering effects. And to say that getting the whole team to hate Vigneault, what coach was a lot like, did that all the time, was Michel Therrien. And he's on the staff. So I believe it, 100% I believe it. Yeah, I mean, what is your confidence level that Fletcher does pull off these moves in the offseason? Because he had done a whole lot of nothing up until this trade deadline, which gave me a little bit of a shred of hope because he did wait until the last second, but ultimately he did make some moves.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a much more patient person with the sport because I understand exactly. Having worked for the team, I kind of know what goes into the process of all this, and I understand that, it's not something that, we want instant gratification as fans, right? You always want, fix it now. And if they don't, it's like, well, Chuck's not paying attention. He's dropping the ball. Well, maybe not. So I'm willing to always be a little bit more patient with guys when they first get here. And when I say patient, I think sometimes for a general manager, it takes 3 seasons, right? And with a coach, it takes at least a full year, maybe even 2. So I'm cool with waiting a little bit. But I'll tell you this now, if this team gets remade, as I think it's going to be remade with as many changes as I suggested, then it's going to be a team that's built in Chuck's image at that point. And it's going to be a different team for AV to coach. If they're still having the same problems come Christmas next year, I think it's fair for all of us to, at that point, say, what the hell is going on? Yeah. Do you know what you guys are doing at this point? Because we gave you new players, we gave you an opportunity to change the team, and nothing's been fixed. What's going on? But I think we owe them the time to do that, because in a lot of ways, Chuck is trying to win this season with a roster full of Ron Hextall's players.
Yeah.
Right? And so in that regard, you got to give Chuck a little bit of a pass to say these aren't really his guys. Now, you could argue he had time last year and this year to make changes and didn't. But, I mean, really, as well as the team played last year prior to the pandemic, it's really hard to sit here and say, okay, so they were playing great. They were a Stanley Cup favorite in March when the pandemic hit. And then 4 months go by, and they're not as good in the bubble, but that's because every team is kind of brought back onto a level playing field at that point. So, okay, fine. You got to think that the Flyers are, as they were constructed, a favorite again coming into this season. So you can't blame him for thinking that. Yep. So that's why I sit there and say, okay, they were wrong, but weren't we all? Like, I mean, I would think that if we all of us honestly went back and we all listened to our podcasts that we recorded back in late December, right before the season was beginning, I can guarantee you we all thought this Flyers team was not only a playoff team, but B, a team that could win the Eastern Division and potentially go to the Final Four, right? We all did it. I mean, I did. I predicted. I'm sure you guys did too. So it's more about us being disappointed with being wrong, I think, than anything else. And so we were all okay with where Chuck had this team at the start of the season. So we can't at this point now be mad at him for not making changes 4 months ago, because that's revisionist history, right? But I think moving forward, we now know that the changes need to be made, and so he has to make them, and so now he's on the clock officially.
Yeah, that's true, and that's thinking rationally. And for a good portion of the season, I was thinking rationally. I'm like, yeah, you know what? Like, everything he's saying is true. I was giving them the benefit of the doubt. It's a flat cap year. It's going to be flat cap for 2 more years. You have the expansion draft coming up. Who could have predicted COVID? Who could have predicted Matt Niskanen retiring at the end of the season? And it's like, yeah, what are you going to do? And then when they come out and they sign Eric Gustafsson, it's like, didn't expect that. Maybe they have some kind of a plan here. And, to see the way that they started the year, they never at any point, at least to me, got it going. They looked bad from – I mean, they beat Pittsburgh. Yeah, even in the 2 wins against Pittsburgh, you were like, well, they can score, but the defense looked really bad. And never at any point did they look like they improved. I mean, obviously they got hit with, a lot of guys got sick. And this is a real thing that we're going through, So, like, when people want to bring it up, I'm not going to discredit that. Like, these guys are going through a season that they've never been through before. They have a lot of young kids on the roster. And I feel like if you're Chuck Fletcher, like, don't you have to consider that when you're putting the roster together a little bit? Like, these are, we have a roster with, 4 or 5, really core vets. And the rest of the guys are 24, 23 years old or younger. Don't we need to bring in, more? If you're not going to bring in a good player, because you didn't bring in a good player in Eric Gustafsson, don't you need to bring in a guy like Zdeno Chara, like someone that can take these younger guys under their wing a little bit. If they need a hug or if they need someone to say, hey, you played a good game, maybe next time. You know what I mean? Like those guys were out there.
So Char is an interesting one to me because I have this discussion with my partner Russ all the time because Russ was they need to sign Chara guy when it was happening and because Chara didn't sign until really late, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember my initial reaction at the time was Zdeno Chara is 44 years old. Guy can't play anymore, right? I mean, how good is he really going to be? It turns out he's actually had a nice season for the Capitals, okay? So he surprised me with as well as he's played. But the other thing that I've since found out is that Chara never wanted to come here. Never did. So, I mean, even if Chuck wanted to go get a guy like Chara, who certainly would have helped this team, Chara was dead set. He wanted to go to Washington. That's where he wanted to play. He wanted to play with Ovi, and he wanted to take a shot at another Stanley Cup with that team because he kind of felt that was the team that had the best opportunity for him to play regular minutes and be part of a Stanley Cup winning team. So, I mean, that's – I don't know. I'm not sitting here saying that Chuck tried to get him. He may not have. And that could be, and then in that case, you would be right. Hey, he should have tried to get him. But I do know from talking to people, outside of the Flyers organization that Chara had no interest in coming to Philadelphia. So, should he have kicked the tires there? Yeah, sure. Why not? If he didn't, slap on the wrist. But at the same time, there weren't really any other defensemen.
No.
When you look at it, I mean, he made an effort. The one thing he did on it wasn't July 1st. It was whatever date it was, October, whatever it was, the first day of free agency. He pushed for Pietrangelo. He made a big time offer for Pietrangelo. Pietrangelo took one from Vegas that was bigger than the Flyers offered. That was really his effort to try and replace Niskanen. I don't know if there was another defenseman that you would have looked at and said, "Oh yeah, that's the guy that they should have gone and gotten." Yeah. That's what makes it hard. That's what makes it hard to sit there and say, "Look, Gustafsson was a mistake." But the reason that they brought in Gustafsson wasn't to replace Niskanen. They weren't planning on having Shane Gostisbehere on this team. And if you even listen to him say it today, he even was surprised that he was saying Gostisbehere has played better this year. If you watch Chuck in a press conference, it was like, he came out of nowhere and he's been great. Okay, fine. Gostisbehere was not going to be part of this team, but they had to hold on to him once Niskanen retired because otherwise they would be short on NHL level defensemen. So Gustafsson was brought in kind of to replace Gostisbehere. Turned out that Gostisbehere was better than Gustafsson, so Gustafsson ended up being a bad signing. And what do you get out of it? A 2022 7th round draft pick. Woohoo, right?
Yeah, I just can't believe this, man. I just can't. I mean, yes, Ghost is playing better. I can't. I'm not going to trash Ghost. I think most of our listeners, viewers, know my thoughts and opinions on Shane Gostisbehere. I would rather him play hockey in another city. Yep. But yeah, I just can't believe it. It's almost like teasing us now. Just trade him, please. Get him off the team somehow.
Well, that's the thing. So the only opportunity that I think that they really ever had to really, really move him was when Hextall was the GM. This goes before Fletcher. I was told that there was that Toronto was interested in him at the time. And at the time, Kasperi Kapanen was on Toronto. They were looking to move Kapanen for Gostisbehere straight up. And Hextall was talking to them about that. And it never happened. For whatever reason, it never happened. And then Hextall got fired. And Gostisbehere went slowly or rapidly downhill from that point. And I think that his worth disappeared with it. And is he having a better year than he had last year? Yeah. But it's hard not to
get worse.
It's hard to be worse than he was last year. Exactly. And look, and I argue with people on social media all the time. I know you didn't want it because I'm sure your listeners are tired of hearing you bitch about Gostisbehere, but I'll take up the mantle for a minute here. Look, I mean, Gostisbehere has had a nice season offensively. That's what he does. He's a good offensive defenseman. He's got a nice shot. He jumps up into the play. He can make a nice pass. That's all well and good. But in the NHL today, if you're going to be a defenseman, you have to know how to play defense. Yes. And that's That's why he was not claimed on waivers. Don't give me the whole, $4.5 million, who's going to take that money? If he was that worthy of a player, if he was that good of a player that could help your team win, you would claim him and find a way, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and the fact that he goes unclaimed by 30 teams and the deadline passes and nobody trades for him tells you that they don't think, well, A, they don't think he's worth his contract, but B, they don't think that he's a good enough player to help their team. And I think that, he's going to have to really have a nice finish to this season. And I'm rooting for it because I think if he has a good finish to the season, then he might restore some of his value and be a tradable player in the offseason, one less year to worry about on that contract as well, right? So I think that, Ghost had a nice game against Buffalo. Great. Keep having him.
Yeah.
Get a hat trick next game, Be the top points per 60-minute defenseman in the NHL. Great. Let's do it because
Most
that way it'll make it easier
scored since March 1st or whatever the hell you want to make up nowadays.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, he'll never be good defensively.
No.
He'll always make a pass in his own zone to put his partner at risk.
I say it all the time. He'll do one great thing. He'll score a great goal or have a great assist in the offensive zone, but then he'll come right back down the other end. And a classic example, and I know it's Patrice Bergeron up for Selke every single year, picks pocket, goes behind the net, boom, leads directly to a goal. I've never seen a defenseman make so many mistakes that lead to a direct scoring chance, or the puck ends up in the back of the net almost every time he makes a mistake.
Yeah.
And it's incredible.
Yeah, it is. It's really, then you hear, Provorov turns the puck over more. And he does. But Provorov also handles the puck a lot more. He's on the ice 7 minutes,
25
8
minutes a night. Yeah.
Right, more a night. Of course he's going to turn the puck over more than Gostisbehere. And that's not me trying to defend Provorov. I think Provorov has had a subpar season this year as well.
I would agree.
I mean, he's definitely taken a step back to the point where I'm starting to wonder, is he really a one? I mean, I think he's still a top pair guy long term, but maybe he's more of a two than a one. Maybe he's more of a Robin than a Batman. That's my concern. I mean, I still think he's young enough that he could become that one again, and he can get back to being that guy, especially if he has the right partner on the other side.
I think that's the key.
Which it could well be. But at the same time, it's a little concerning that in seasons that he hasn't had that partner, that he's not looked as good.
Right.
That he's made more mistakes from trying to do too much. So it makes me worry just a little bit, right? So I'm not sitting here trying to, I always defend Provorov or I always defend Sanheim. I don't. I think that these guys have taken a step back too. But man, Shane Gostisbehere, anybody who's defending him, you're not watching the game. You're watching the fact that he can score and that he's electric offensively, but he's a defenseman. Watch him play defense.
Yeah.
And then tell me that he's as good as you want him to be.
I feel like if you're a defenseman and you're making $4 million a year and nobody picks you up, like that's a bargain for a good defenseman. I feel like $4 million for a top 4D or a D that can play on the power play. If nobody picks you up on waivers, that should tell you all you need to know. I mean, I know that, there's different factors. People want to make up all kinds of excuses, but playoff teams, they don't need guys that are going to turn the puck over and lose them games because he does that.
Right.
He'll lose you games.
Yes.
I always say, he'll do enough to keep you in a game, but all he has to do is make that one mistake to lose you a game, and he's done it.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. Yeah, you're not going to get any complaints from me with that take. I'll promise you that.
And that Pittsburgh game is a perfect example of that amazing pass he made to I think it was Kapanen. You're right. You said in a nice 2-minute, 3-minute span what I've been trying to get across for months with Ghost, with the whole people are just scoreboard watching or highlight reel watching, because when you actually watch this guy play defense, it is a dumpster fire. Like I cannot believe some of the stuff I read. I'm like,
well, one thing I'll say to you guys, and obviously, if you guys are seeing the same thing I'm seeing, then you know how to watch a hockey game. So kudos to you. But hockey is a difficult sport to watch as a fan because it's an exciting sport and it's fun to be a part of. It's fun to be there at the games. It's cool to watch on TV. But especially if you're watching it on TV, you miss so much. There's so many things about the sport and no one explains it to you, right? No one really explains to you what's going on.
Yeah.
And so therefore, if you don't quite know, then of course you're going to be enamored with a player like Gostisbehere because of what he can do, because he scores and he makes a great pass. And well, that guy's good. But you don't understand that there are so many little things that go into the game that you can't measure statistically that dictate whether a player is, why he's in the lineup, why he's not in the lineup. And fans get all frustrated and everything, and I try to explain to them on Twitter, but they're so, one-sided about the argument that they can't see it and they can't understand it. And it's tough. It's tough sometimes. It really is. And I get it. I remember being that kid who watched games and didn't really know what was going on, and my favorite players were always the guys who scored and not the guys who didn't. Like, I always wondered why is this guy in the lineup? Well, he can't score a goal. Well, guess what? He's a really solid defenseman. That's why he's in the lineup. Or
that was
he's
Shel
really good
Samuelson for me.
Shel Samuelson, I mean, seriously, I didn't know how far back you guys were going to go, but like Brad Marsh, was that guy for me, right? I mean, going back, and even fourth line guys, or third line guys, checking line guys, like, those guys never score, but they have value within the game of hockey if you actually watch the game. So I think that sometimes there are fans who don't quite get it, and I try to help, but then they get too upset.
It was something just popped up here. It was against the Devils. I think it was a game we actually won like 4-1 or something. Hart was in net, and the one goal the Devils scored was I believe the Devils were making a line change as the Flyers defense was coming out, and it was a pretty nice shot. But Gustafsson, for no reason, he had another defensive partner with him, gave him all the room in the world to take the shot, and it just didn't make any sense. And everybody at the time, I was still trying to defend Hart. I said, listen, I know he's having some rough games, but he's getting hung out to dry. And I just couldn't get that message across enough. And this one goal really irked me. And I'm trying to explain. I'm like, why is Gustafsson giving him 19 steps like this? Yeah. He's got a defensive partner. The Devils went for a line change. He has nowhere to go with the puck. Oh, well, Hart's got to have that. I'm like, it's like they're just not – they're looking right through everything I just said. I don't understand. I'm like, what a defenseman does? Like, they're supposed to play defense. It's in the name.
Their mind made up, man.
Yes, yeah. It's like exactly. So anything
you guys were talking about the goal the other day against Buffalo, or yesterday against Buffalo, where the handoff behind the net and against Boston, but handoff behind the net and Gostisbehere turns it over, Bergeron's on him, and then boom, it becomes a goal. Guy sends me a screenshot on Twitter, and he says, "Look where all the players are. What's he supposed to do?" I gave him 4 options that he could have made that wouldn't have turned over the puck, or would have at least given the team time to react, right? Even if you just dump it into the corner and make it a 50-50 puck, at the worst, at least gets people down, it gets your other players involved in the play. And he responds by saying, "Oh, he doesn't have time for any of that." Like, well, I just gave you 4 options. He could have rimmed it. He could have dropped it behind him because Sanheim's coming that direction. He could have thrown it into the corner. He could have tied up Bergeron behind the net and held it with his skates against the boards. He could have done any of those things. He just let the puck be taken off his stick. I said, that's the difference. There are other options, but unless you think the game or know the game, you just assume, oh, well, it's everybody else's fault because they're not in the right position, so that's why. Plus, there are so many people who protect him on social media.
How about they took so long to make the damn play happen that Bergeron saw the play before it happened, caught up, still stole the puck, and they scored off of it. Like, if you're going to do something, this is a problem I have with this Flyers team, and I didn't think that they would have these issues this year because it's year 2 with essentially the same roster. It looks like they think before they do everything.
They're in their own heads.
Why isn't it bang, bang yet? Like towards the end of last year, or even I remember watching these guys, I think in the beginning of the season, the entries into the opposition zone, it was 1-2 passes through the neutral zone, and boom, they were in the other end of the ice. Mm-hmm. Now it's like, okay, I have the puck. Let me see where I got to pass it. Pass the puck. Where do I got to go next? Like they're thinking about everything. It's like, this is year 2. You're supposed to already know this stuff. Well, why is this happening?
I was having this conversation with Jason Martinez the other day where we were talking about Marchand's shorthanded goal that won the game for Boston last Tuesday. So there's the turnover in their zone. And you're like, well, why is nobody getting back? And it's because these players are sitting there, and even if it's just for a half second, in their head they go, "Oh no, here we go again," and then they start skating. It's too late at that point, right? Yep. I mean, so you're like, well, why are they not in the camera shot? Why are they not, why aren't they catching up to these guys? Why aren't they catching to the trailer? And it's because they are in their own heads a little bit, and sometimes that's all it takes is that little briefest of pauses, and you're behind the play.
Yep.
It's as opposed to reacting right away, right? And I think that's part of the problem. I think that they get so beaten down by the same mistakes hurting them game in and game out that it's almost like a sigh, and then all right, let's go try and make a play. And they shouldn't have that sigh. I think that's what's kind of in between there.
That's a little concerning. I don't know how, outside of, I guess, hopefully a new season starting. I don't know how you kind of
turn over the roster. I mean, that's it. You find players who aren't mental midgets, right? I mean, that's what you got to do. Okay,
it's the truth. I mean, we've been saying it, Jim. We've had issues with some of these guys, out of confidence or whatnot. It's like they get down so quick, and it's like, you can't even get set into it, ready to watch a game. They're down 2-0, or one of their blowouts. You can't even get out of the halfway through the game before it's 6-0. It's embarrassing, and that's why Twitter, we're all at each other's throats. It's just because they get so badly embarrassed, and then when the same exact team comes back that did it to you, and the same exact player has the same exact amount of points, and they do it again, it's like,
you're not talking about Zibanejad, are you?
How the hell you guys think I feel? I have to write about it every
time. Oh God!
I got to come up with a different way of telling the same story. 40
Not
times
even
over.
Wayne Gretzky's done what Mika Zibanejad did to the Flyers.
I know.
It's crazy, man. So I wanted to ask, and I'm sure Jack wants to ask you some questions about this too, but you mentioned mental midgets, and this is a team full of younger players, and we talk about the guys who wear the A's and the guys who wear the C's quite often on the show. We toss around the word like leadership and what's going on in the room kind of thing. But, you know people, and you were around these guys. Can you help us out a little bit with a player like Jake Voracek? Because just based off, fan perception and what we see on TV, what he allows us to see, and some of his stupid media takes about playing, 60-minute hockey cliches, BS, and, what happened with Sealski in the media for everyone to see. To me, he's showing me that he is not the kind of leader that I want on my hockey team. Have you seen or heard anything to the tune of these, what I'm talking about here?
Sure.
Or he just doesn't seem like the guy that I want my younger generation of Flyers taking after.
Yeah, first thing I'll say is this, just to kind of give it like a little bit of a background. I know that captains and alternate captains have been the conversation du jour in Philadelphia for decades. I mean, going back to, they need to when they stripped the C off of Lindros and gave it to Desjardins. It's really the whole thing. It's crazy. But I'll tell you that hockey players and coaches, they don't put as much stock into C's and A's as we do. Right. So that's just a little caveat there. They have to have a captain and alternates to talk to the officials on the ice. That's an NHL rule. That's why those roles exist. Okay. We've turned it into that they have to be like, we expect our captain to be like Maximus, right? And out there and leading these people into battle every time, and have the greatest things in the world to say. So, there's a little bit of over hyping the roles.
For sure.
As far as Voracek is concerned, he's an alternate captain, I think more so because he's willing to engage these officials because he's a veteran. He's been around a long time, and he's willing to be somebody who will talk to them and try and influence officiating as best as he can. Okay. As far as being a leader in the locker room, you guys are right. He's a crusty guy. And Jake has always been that way. He's always been a little bit. I like him personally. I have good conversations with him. But he does get a little a little fired up, a little agitated, and I think it rubbed some people the wrong way, maybe even some teammates the wrong way. And I know for a fact that last year in the bubble that he did something. He left the hotel when he wasn't supposed to, and they were all panicked that they were going to end up with COVID. And like, how can one of the leaders of the team, do this? And so there was that too. And so yeah, I mean, I think Jake can be a little bit of a daunting figure for certain young players in the locker room. And I think it's a fair question to say, why would you have him be a leader on your team? But like I said, I think that the way we view leadership and the way a team views leadership is something completely different. I'll give you a perfect example. The game against Buffalo, up in Buffalo, where they were down 3-0 and came back and won 4-3, and Giroux scores the 2 goals late, right, in the third period. Giroux's interviewed on the bench after the game, and I think it was Keith Jones who asked him, hey, did you have to say anything between periods in the locker room, with the team being down 3-0 to Buffalo? And he said, no, I didn't say anything. It was Justin Braun and Scott Lawton who got up and spoke to the team. And he said, whatever. Well, then everybody went nuts. Oh, our captain's silent, but with Justin Braun and Scott Lawton, they're the ones who have to speak up. That's what I think is lost on people sometimes. We've all been in team environments before. Sometimes the same voice becomes stale, so somebody else has to speak up and say the same thing that the captain has been saying. Giroux is a very well-respected captain in the locker room. Those guys really like him. Even the young guys, they really like him. And you guys have seen how he's played this year. He's played his butt off, right? I mean, he really has. Okay. So I mean, to me, that's the kind of thing that you want a leader to play the game. Okay. So, but it's okay for guys who don't have letters to be vocal, right? It's okay for that. Sure. When Mike Richards was the captain, it was Chris Pronger's locker room. I'll tell you that when Wayne Gretzky was a captain and won 4 Stanley Cups with the Edmonton Oilers, it was Mark Messier's locker room. Gretzky never said a word. Messier was the voice in that locker room. So, I mean, again, captains are named captains for certain reasons that the team chooses, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be the most vocal person in the locker room. Jake, I can understand why, though, people get a little annoyed with him because, he says what he wants to say, and he's unfiltered, and that's just Jake Voracek. He's a beauty, man.
I couldn't agree with you more about the letter thing. It just seems like nowadays, whoever the best player is usually gets to actually. The fact that Jack Hughes didn't get the captaincy in the Devils was it surprised me. Usually that's what they do nowadays. They just give it to whoever the best guy is. And we'll go back to they should rip the C off of Giroux and give it to Simmons. I'm like, all that's going to do is embarrass one player and nothing else is going to change. Now Simmons is going to feel awkward. Yeah. So I've been trying to get that mantra across forever now. I don't have a big enough voice, obviously, but the captaincy, that doesn't mean anything to me. And the whole stale thing makes sense too. Not to mention Braun's actually been on successful teams. So that makes sense in its own right.
Right.
The thing with Jake is when you go back to the Sealski thing, and I brought this up before. So the night he went off on Sealski, do you remember what else happened during that game?
I'm trying to remember what game that was. What game was that again?
Against Pitt or something. Konechny scored his like first hat trick as a. In his
yeah, okay, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Nobody remembers that or knows because all the talk was on Voracek and Seals.
Well, I remember Konechny sitting off to the side laughing when Jake was doing that bit. And I'm surprised that it came out when it did, because that Sealski story goes back to like early last season.
Yeah. Not
even like at the end of the season or anything like that. I mean, that was early in the season last year, and that it took Voracek over a year to kind of come back and call Mike a weasel. I mean, I disagreed with Mike's story. I remember talking to some people about it. I remember, some people in the Flyers locker room thinking it was not a good story, and I agreed. But I don't necessarily know if you need to wait a year and a half to exact your revenge on a guy in a video press conference to make him sound bad. So
yeah, it felt like it came out of nowhere.
It did. I wasn't expecting it. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really know Jake as well as most people, but we got this feeling if the team, say a young Farabee's man, we had a rough game and we really almost had him. And Jake strikes me as the We want, did you cash your paycheck? What are you going to do later today? It's just like, I don't see that we need to win at all costs drive. And when I think of the core, like Giroux's a guy, his contract's going to be up soon. I would like him re-signed at a cheaper deal and still with the team. Like he's a core player, but I still see he has value. He still plays his ass off. He's won this team games. Him and like sometimes a great Brian Elliott performance. Where Jake, he'll get you the points. And I see certain beat writers will say things like, well, where are you going to get those 65, 70 points? I'm like, $8.25 million is a lot of money. I'm sure we'll find somebody or somebody will step up. And for all the intangibles he doesn't bring or the points he gives back, and it just makes sense with his salary in his contract. That's why his name is so often brought up. And these other things that we discussed with the locker room, are we right is really what we're getting at here. And it sounds like it's not 100, where there's smoke, there might be some fire.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I don't think it's as bad as some people have made it out to be, but I do think it's there. I do think that there are young players who aren't. Voracek makes a lot of mistakes. We know this. He's also one of those guys like Provorov who has the puck on his stick a lot, and either he makes a really nice play or he turns the puck over. And I think that, young players who are rooted to the bench or who get healthy scratched for a couple games for doing the same thing, they get frustrated that a player like Voracek gets away with it without much retribution, and that they don't. And I think and the fact that Jake is, like I said, is crusty is, I think, the best word for him. The fact that he's got that attitude and that he gets away with it, I think that can certainly be a thing that bothers a younger player. But I don't sit there and think that Jake is like being a jerk to anybody in the room. I don't think that he's like, telling kids that they suck and they need to know their role or whatever else. I mean, I don't think that's happening. I just think he's the guy that gets away with things that you can't get away with, and it's frustrating.
Yeah. I'll put you on the spot real quick here. Just yes or no. Is this team better off without Jake Voracek?
So you want it to be yes or no, and I can't give you a yes or no.
There's a lot of intangibles, like how is he replaced? And
yeah, I mean that's. I mean, can they be? Yes, they can be better. They can be better without him.
Is better than the devil you don't know. Essentially,
I think that they can. I think they can win with him, and I think they can win without him. So I mean, I could answer that question yes or no. And be right in either way, depending on how you replace him. If you took that $8 million and went out and got, 2 players at half that salary who are putting up 40 to 50 points apiece, yeah, that's better, right? I mean, you're getting more production. You got an extra player. It makes your offense deeper. Yeah, absolutely. But if you take that money and you go out and get players who are, you expect to do well, who don't do well, who give you the kind of production that Nolan Patrick gives you, then you're going to be frustrated and be like, man, I wish that they still had Voracek, right? I mean, so I mean, I think that, it can be a yes for sure, but it can also be a no.
I guess I'm at the point where I'm willing to explore the unexplored at this point.
Well, and that's fine. Like, and I think that the team might be there. I don't defend Voracek like I defend Giroux. I feel like I have to defend Giroux because of all the craziness about how he's terrible, he stinks, his team, he's never won anything, and it's like there have been great players on bad teams for decades in every sport, and you're not going to sit there and say that they stink, right? They just happen to be a great player on a bad team. So I defend Giroux a lot. I don't defend Voracek as much, and it's because of this, because I can see them winning without him. And I think that they're going to try and, like I said, I think they're going to try and move that contract, whether it's his or Van Riemsdyk's. They can't. Giroux's only got 1 year left. They can't move Hayes, which is a bad contract. We haven't even talked about Kevin Hayes. We're talking about a bad contract. I mean, but he's got a no movement clause, which makes it even worse. So they can't move him. So if you're going to open up salary, the only places that you can really do it, I mean, you tried with Gostisbehere and it didn't work. The only other place you can really do it is either Van Riemsdyk or Voracek. And, they're going to try and move one of the two.
Yeah, and I pray to God, even as good as JVR has been this year, one of those contracts has to go for this team to have a real chance, unless they're moving Sanheim Myers connecting, and and I'm hoping, and a couple of guys that they got to resign. Sanheim should be due for a new contract, I believe. If maybe it's next year, I'm not sure, but these guys aren't going to get what we thought they were going to get because of how bad the team's regressed. Patrick, if he makes even $1 million, do you think they really did try to move him at all? Well, maybe not all costs.
100%. They've been trying to move. They've been trying to move Nolan Patrick since last year. They offered him in the right before Patrick Laine got shipped to Columbus for Dubois. The Flyers were in on that conversation for Laine, and Nolan Patrick was a guy they were trying to push there because Patrick is from Winnipeg. He's more comfortable at home. And so they really wanted to make that happen, but Winnipeg smartly took Dubois instead. It's worked out for them. So that didn't happen. And I know that they were pushing Nolan this past couple weeks, and nobody took him. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the offseason if somebody's willing to take him as an add-in to a deal. As for Sanheim, you're right. He is an RFA after this year. So they're going to have to get him a new contract, and he's arbitration eligible too, which you never want to really take a guy to arbitration. So I think that they'll get him something probably similar to what he's currently making, which is 3.25. I could see him getting another 2-year deal, probably in that 3.5 range, but not much more than that. And then see what happens. See if he continues to grow. But yeah, I mean that, and Carter Hart's an RFA after the season as well. So they gotta sign him, and that's going to be an interesting contract as well, considering he hasn't made any money really. I mean, $730,000 is what he makes right now. It's going to be interesting to see how long they sign him for and for how much, because that's an interesting contract as well. So they have a lot of decisions to make this summer. It's going to be really, really interesting to see what the Flyers do.
You think they bring Elliott back?
I don't know. I'm starting to think no, and the reason I say that is because you heard AV say the other night when he had the good game against Boston. He said, "When Moose is fresh, he's been great for us," and that's a key thing to say. In other words, he gets tired easily. So, he's got a lot of wear and tear on him. If Carter's not ready to carry the load, and what I mean by carry the load, start 60 games a year, then you probably need another backup goalie who can split some time with him, because I don't think you can rely on Elliott to start 35 games a year at this point in his career. So that's why I'm gonna lean more toward no. But the fact that he has been good when he's been fresh, I think leaves the door open a little bit for the possibility of him coming back if the Flyers don't find another, veteran goalie who can play more games than Brian Elliott could.
You think that's why we were hearing Jonathan Bernier's name, that they weren't so much looking to maybe fill in, because they knew maybe they weren't going to bring back Brian Elliott. Maybe they were getting ahead of the game a little bit.
Well, I think the Bernier thing, I think that was part of it. I think what you were looking at there was they were so concerned with Hart that it was almost like, okay, we need to shut him down. Like there was an actual discussion going on amongst the organization to not let Carter play again this year. Wow. Like really to shut him down from games. They were still let him practice, but shut him down from games and bring in a veteran goalie like Bernier and have Bernier split time with Elliott. But there was a split, amongst, Chuck and his group as to if that was a smart thing to do. And ultimately they decided not to. But I thought that there was a chance that they would get involved with Bernier anyway as like a third goalie and kind of bring him in, let him play 4 or 5 games and see if this is a guy that maybe you would want to keep instead of Elliott as your veteran backup for next year. But they ultimately didn't do it, so it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that backup goalie role as well.
I would definitely like
Okay.
Bernier, but yeah, I guess I thought Elliott was the move, but he is getting older, and yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Is there a free agent out there at any position that you hope the Flyers are in on, and hopefully they figure out the cap and can bring in whoever they want? But is there a certain name that really jumps out at you?
As far as backup goalie?
No, any position. Just you're going into free
well,
agency, you freed up some money, and you just want to improve the team.
No, that's a great question. I think it's going to be interesting to see more what they do trade wise first before I think about free agency, because I think that the trades are coming first. I think that you're going to see trades at the draft. I think is really what's going to happen first and foremost before you get to free agency. That being said, it was interesting when Chuck was asked today, when he was asked, are you going to go out and try and get a number one defenseman, or are you going to try and get somebody, you weren't able to get somebody to replace Matt Niskanen last year. You're going to try and find that kind of player this time around. And Chuck said, well, that kind of player is not always the easiest to find. There are different kinds of defensemen, and all of them can be used in a certain way. And so we'll look and see what's available and try and get what's the best fit. I don't know if I'm looking at defensemen for next year. I mean, obviously the big name everybody's going to want to talk about is Dougie Hamilton's an unrestricted free agent. I don't know if you're going to be able to get in on that money. I'm not even sure Carolina's going to let him go, especially if they make a great run this year and they get to the final, or at least Final Four. I think they might try and bring him back. So beyond that, I mean, I don't think that there's any like big name free agent defenseman I sit there and go, oh, that's the guy I got to have. They were in on conversations with Arizona for Goligoski. I know that doesn't excite anybody really, but I mean, he's a guy. Or Jason Demers also with Arizona that they were talking to. I mean, Savard's going to be a free agent in the offseason. It's the right-hand shot. But like I said, I think you guys were on when we were talking about Ryan Ellis earlier. I think that's kind of the direction that they would want to go first and foremost is go make a trade for a player who can be Provorov's partner for 5 years. Mm-hmm. That's what they want. And I'm not certain that you have that in free agency. And I think that that's more acquired via trade. So, I think we'll see those changes first, and then once we know what they did trade wise, and then at the draft, I think then we'll see what happens. What's out there in free agency, and have a better idea of what he might be targeting at that point.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, and I'm hoping that he's wheeling and dealing, because I agree. Throwing a lot of money at a free agent guy, that very rarely works out, especially if you're doing it multiple times. And they've already done it with Hayes, and we see where we're at with that contract, as you alluded to earlier.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's the thing. I mean, Kevin Hayes last year, he was worth what they paid him. I mean, he was really good last year. He not just on the ice, but off it. He was, a real important part of that locker room, really keeping it loose and keeping things fun. And then for whatever reason this year, he just kind of is not that. And who knows why. But this has been kind of his trend. If you go back over his career, he has parts of his season where he's great, and then parts of the season where he completely disappears. And maybe we didn't get to see that at all last year because it was such a shortened campaign. He had his struggles early when he first got here, but then he got hot, and he kind of stayed hot. And then whatever happened, then we had the 4 months off, and then there was just, a month of hockey, and then we're more time off, and now he's back again. And maybe that kind of back and forth and up and down and whatever is what kind of brings you back to the old Kevin Hayes. The Flyers are going to need him to be much better next year. I mean, that's going to be one of the keys to this retooling of the team is Kevin Hayes is going to have to be a better player, because you can't have another guy making that kind of money who is just, going through the motions out there. You just can't. That player needs to be what he was last year. And I'm a little concerned that he won't get back to that. And that's why I think it's a bad contract. But, hey, he proved me wrong once. Maybe he can prove me wrong a second time.
Hopefully. And that's kind of going to bring us towards the end of our show here. We're just about an hour over having you on.
Yeah.
If I could ask you one more thing, do you feel better about the direction of this team at 8:18 Monday night as opposed to 8 o'clock this morning?
Hey, slightly. Only slightly. And when I say the direction, I mean, I'm not thinking for this year, obviously. I mean,
right.
There's still people who believe, they're only 4 points out. They can still catch Boston's in free fall. They can catch them. I'm not there. I'm with you guys thinking down the road. You got a couple draft picks for what it was worth. At least recognize that the team did not need to try and buy anything right now. They didn't give up assets. They kept a player that they like in Scott Lawton for a good deal that even though it's a little bit longer on term at $3 million a year, by years 4 and 5 that contract's going to be well worth it for what Scott Lawton is. So I kind of think that the three things that they did today were all positives in a way. Mm-hmm. Yes. Do I feel better than at 8 o'clock this morning? Yeah, not a lot better, but better. It's really going to come down to what July becomes for this team. As I wrote I wrote a quick story right before I came on with you guys, and I ended it by saying, this season ends on May the 10th for the Flyers, but next season has started already. And so that to me is really where it's going to, the rubber's going to meet the road. What does Chuck do in the summer to get this team to be a better team next season? And if we don't like it, if we're sitting here having this conversation again, you guys have me on again in a couple months, and we talk about it, and they're like, man, he didn't do enough, then we'll be in that mode. It'll be like, we're not happy. Or we look at it and say, holy cow, how did Chuck put this together? He's a genius, right? I think it's going to be one or the other. We're either going to love him or hate him. There's not going to be a middle ground.
It seems like that's like all of his moves too. Either he hits home runs or it's like, dude, what were you thinking? There's been no middle with Chuck yet.
Yeah.
So maybe things will kind of even out as we go along here.
We'll see.
Okay. So, and thanks for coming on.
Hey guys, anytime.
I'm sure everyone that watches and listens to us already follows you guys, but just in case, where can people find you and where can they listen to you guys?
Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter, of course, at @SanPhilly. And I write for crossingbroad.com. And of course, the podcast, Snow the Goalie. I'm not like my partner. I don't call it the Only Flyers podcast. I know he does that. But the Snow the Goalie podcast, which you can get on anywhere you get your podcasts. Just download it and subscribe and give it a listen. We put one out every week. So it's good stuff. Like I said, we're going to have we're actually going to have two guests on this week. And I already told you that we're going to have Nick Kiprios, but we're also going to have Jeremy Roenick on Wednesday as well. So we'll have two guests on this week talking about the Flyers, the trade deadline, and where they go from here. So it should be fun. Two beauties in 1 week. Yeah, I know.
I can just say, we got some high wide homies. If I'm giving you permission, you can listen to Snow the Goalie. I love your show. You guys do a great job. Seriously.
Thanks.
I really enjoy it, and it was a pleasure having you on.
Yeah, anytime, guys. I appreciate coming on.
All right, and another one of our favorite guys. Tell Russ we said hi, and we'll have to talk soon, man.
Yep, sounds good.
Take care.
All right, take care, boys.
All right, everyone. There he is. The man, the myth, the legend, the one and only San Filippo. Man, what a guy. What a great pair. I mean, to have not just Rush Joy on that show, but Anthony San Filippo, match made in heaven. I'm glad we finally got to get Anthony on.
What's funny, those two minds, when they go at it, that's fun to listen to as well. And they do a lot of, at least they did, I don't know if they still do it, they were doing in the bubble intermissions. They would just jump on for like the intermission. And this is when
the Press Pro show.
The Islanders, and when things weren't so good, some of the back and forth they were having, it got a little heated. It was fun to watch. I was getting in there. I was asking questions and shit. And it just would spark something with them. And Yeah, it was funny because Russell go at him a little bit about Giroux sometimes, and you know how he loves Giroux, and he should. I love Giroux too, but it's good. It's really good stuff. And you can see the mind, he just, I mean, it does help that we agree with essentially everything he said. It is something to read so much Twitter for so long. It's like, take Ghost, for instance, and then have a mind that's constantly around the team and understands the guy can't play defense. It's like you read something so long, you almost start to believe it. Like, is Ghost better than I am perceiving? Because I don't miss a game unless like I have a child, which happened this year. You know what I mean? Like, something crazy like that. The 8-3, the 9-0. I watched from the beginning to the end. Like I'm not really zoned in as much as you'd like to be, but I watch everything I can. And to hear all this Ghost love, it's like, all right, I get it. He's an offensive defenseman, but have you seen him play defense? And to have him come on the show and lay it out like, hey, I see it too. I cover the team. I have to sit there and watch all the bullshit no matter what, because it's my job. To have that brought back, like, yeah, he's terrible on defense. We need to move on. It made me feel better about like my perception of the game.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I'm going nuts, talking to these people on Twitter. And it's like, people like Nate Thompson serve a purpose. And that purpose is not to score goals every time he steps onto the ice, right? He's the grittier guy. He's going to win the board battles, going to win your face-offs. If he needs to drop the gloves to protect the teammate or get the bench sparked up, he'll do it. 35, 36 years old, he'll still do it. And not enough people respect guys like that. Not enough people care to watch those guys. They want to see goals, goals, goals. If your defenseman's not scoring goals, they don't want him. And it's like, he's got defense in his position name. If he can't play defense, why do you want the guy? It's like you could score all the goals. I've said it many times. You can score 3 goals a game, but if you're giving up 4, you're going to lose, So I don't know. I'm glad that he said that. I liked his little analogy there. A lot of people watch the game. They don't necessarily know what they're watching, and I guess, that's true because Ghost, he can be fun. He can be very fun to watch, but he can also lose you games. And that's when I'm just like, I don't know how you can be so attached to a guy that's going to literally lose you hockey games sometimes, So yeah, it was good to finally get Anthony on. Great guest. It's been, I think I actually, believe it or not, reached out to him before Russ last year when we had Russ on. And so it's been over a year till we finally got Anthony on. I'm glad we did.
Worth the wait.
I hope the listeners and the viewers, I hope you guys enjoyed listening to Anthony. I'm sure you've listened to him before. Awesome guy.
My favorite part of that, though, the whole thing, 8 or 9 different roster players going into next year. Now, a lot of that can be, you're replacing Raffle. You're replacing maybe Gustafson. If you're trying to look at it in a ticky-tack way, Elliott as well. It's like maybe it's not like the biggest changes ever where it's NHL moves where you're, the video game where you're trading 3 players, Voracek, JVR, and I don't know, somebody for Gaudreau and Monahan. And not like that, but like there's going to be a lot of moves, and it'll be a lot of little pieces, but I do think some big names going to get moved. And I hope it's just not like JVR to Seattle and that's it. I really hope that, like, listen, I like a lot of these players. I think Konechny has had some rough bouts. I think the entire team's had rough bouts. If he gets moved, I just hope whatever we get in return is worth it because I do like the guy. Some people just hate him and that's the end of the story. I don't think it's as black and white as that. If he gets moved, which he very well could be, and the same goes for Sanheim and Myers, I just hope what we get back is worth it, but I'm prepared. I'm already prepared to move on without these players. Maybe not all of them, but like a bunch of them. I was a little shocked to see how much they were pushing Patrick. I guess they don't see him ever regaining that value, which going by his play this year makes sense. And the whole missed the season thing, it's cute in theory that if he just plays the whole season, it's good. When you have that much ice time and don't produce, that's a problem. I'm just, if they move him, whatever. We'll just cut our losses and move on from there. I'm excited for this off season. I hope it's not false hope. I hope what Fletcher did at the deadline is showing that he understands some idea of value isn't just, false hope. Like I said, I hope that he hits the ground running when the off season starts. I hope the draft is as good as it's making it sound to be, I hope the expansion draft, they really use that as an opportunity, and then they can help remold this team into something. Their pieces are there. We just need to get rid of some dead weight, bring in some guys with grit and talent and some bite, and hey, maybe we'll be right back at it. But this season,
I think I agree. Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, the groundwork is there. You know, they have to make one, in my opinion, one major switch. They need to bring in, one significant player and get rid of one significant player. I mean, number one, just to make the money work, but number two, hopefully switch up the atmosphere a little bit and shore up your D, fill out your bottom line, and let's see what we can do. Because there's another trade deadline next year. I'm sure hopefully they're buying next trade deadline. We'll have to have Anthony on then too. So, Jack, we are coming towards the end of this show. This will be 2, 3. This is about 4.5 hours of podcast for me today. I'm a little parched. Maybe we can wrap this one. How you feeling after that shot, by the way?
No, I feel nothing. Not even the arm's not even dead yet. Like, I feel I'm pissed off. I missed the rest of the show. Like, I missed the Lawton signing, and I missed any kind of trades that trickled through at the end. I missed it all.
Yeah. Make sure you guys, if you haven't listened already, make sure you go check out our trade deadline show. We had a multitude of great guests on. We had Kyle Hall of the Broadway Hat podcast, some Ranger perspective. We had Shannon Walsh from the Slapshot Sweethearts for some Bruins perspective. Jealous of both of them because their teams are doing fun things. They're fun to watch, fun to be a fan of those teams. And then we had our good friend Alex Appleyard to top it all off. Make sure you give that a listen. Hopefully we provided enough NHL trade deadline content for you guys to get you through, not just today, but for the week. And we'll be back next week to talk more Philadelphia Flyers hockey. So, Jack, you got anything you want to promote? I'm sorry. How rude of me. Anything?
There's going to be probably a stale episode of Full Circle coming out. We did want to get something up just to keep you updated with what the teams were doing before the trade deadline, see if we hit on any predictions, just an idea of where the teams are at. Talked about a couple of Flyers issues that have kind of spilled over into probably every podcast we have. It's an interesting perspective with me and Steve. And then I guess look forward to this new Full Circle coming out the next Sunday, where we're going to discuss not so much what the Flyers did, but what, the Taylor Hall trade and pretty much what all the other teams did, essentially. And definitely Carter to Pittsburgh and moves of that. Oh, and the big Washington trade that just went down like at the last – we had no time to talk about it on this podcast, but we will talk about that. Verona involved in a deal, Anthony Mantha, but all those picks – you look at those player stats, they're very similar. So the fact that all those picks went the other way, we're going to break it all down. It should be fun. So look forward to that. That'll definitely be a week from now. We, as Jimmy said, we had been podcasting. It feels like from last Friday or even before that to today, 12 hours of content or something crazy. It's insane.
Yep. So on that note, boys and girls, until next time, get outside. It's going to be very nice the next 2 days. Enjoy the weather. Take your vitamins and stop trading with Steve Yzerman.
Yeah, right.